and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the first video of 2020. And this video is actually being recorded before the new year begins. It's actually that time between Christmas and New Year's right now. And our house feels crazy because we're about to move. And actually by the time this video comes out, we'll probably be moving a few days after. And so it just feels kind of crazy. And I painted this bird a couple of days ago, and I was inspired actually by a Facebook group that I'm in. And I've shared this before on the channel, but I'm in a Facebook group that's called Free Reference Photos for Artists. And so there's these really generous photographers that post their pictures to the group to allow us artists to paint from them and paint from them royalty free. So it means that we don't have to credit them and that we can go ahead and sell our art that we create from their paintings after we're done. And I just love this group, and there's a lot of really talented photographers in the group and even just amateur photographers, and they share photos from their travels, from where they live, and it's just really amazing to see the different environments and the things that they choose to capture with their cameras. And so this was a robin that was captured by a photographer in the group, and she actually won it was like a challenge that was done in the group, so she won the photography challenge. And so I'm not going to share it here because I don't think that we are actually allowed to share their photographs outside of the group. It's not located on a website like pexels.com or anything, and so I don't want to go and be sharing other people's photographs outside of the group, but I can share my painting, and so that's what I'm doing with you here. And so hopefully this helps inspire you if you've been feeling like painting a bird, or you want to just follow along and try this with me. And so I'm going to share with you some of the techniques that I've been doing as you're watching. And this is not a formal tutorial or anything. A lot of this is actually me just experimenting and practicing, but I think that watching other people practice and learning from what they're doing is really helpful for me personally. So hopefully this helps you too. And I wanted to ask you for a huge favor this year, because I am intending to continue to put out YouTube videos, and I will be committing to posting and continuing to post as I've been doing, but once a week you'll be able to have a video. And obviously if there's more that I can do, I'll post more per week, but you can definitely expect one a week. And my favor that I'm asking is to let me know whether or not you like this video, or if there are actually other videos that you would like to see, if it's subject matter, like things that you would like to see painted. So in this case it's a bird, but if it's like an ocean or a beach, or if it's something that you just want to see what my version might look like, I'm totally willing to experiment and give it a try. So leave a comment below letting me know what those are. So I will try to make those videos throughout this year. And so I can't obviously promise that I'll get to all of them, but if you let me know, then it helps me create more videos that I'm sure other people have the same curiosity to see too. And so by leaving a comment, you're helping other people too. All right, so let's get into what I'm actually doing in this painting. The first thing I want to tell you is that I've been experimenting a lot more with painting really wet. So when I first started with watercolors, I would paint a lot with this technique that's called wet on dry, which basically is how it sounds. I'm just painting with wet paint directly onto dry paper. And within that comfort zone that I had, I would use wet on wet techniques and other techniques, but I wouldn't paint very wet, meaning I wouldn't go in and wet the entire paper and then go in with a lot of paint and let it just kind of bleed like I've been doing in this current painting that you're seeing. And so with that, I've started taping my paper down. And that's the first thing I wanted to just share with you, is that taping your paper down will help you a lot if you're painting like this in two ways. The first is to create a hard edge border if that's what you want. So if you paint all the way up to the edge of the tape, you're going to end up with a clean border when you're done. And the second thing is that it actually, when you're painting really wet like this, it helps you hold the paper down, because when you paint this wet, even if it's 140 pound, which is the minimum weight that I would recommend, if you're painting on 140 pound paper and you're painting wet like this, the paper will start to curl a little bit. And that's just the nature of it. But then once it dries and you've taped it down like this, it will help it dry flatter, and it gives you that clean border. All right, so in this painting though, I decided to paint and allow it to have a organic border. And so I didn't paint all the way to the edge. And so I let it have this more natural border on purpose, and that was intentional. And then I came back in and I used gray, and my gray is made up of burnt sienna and a French ultramarine. And I also just let the colors be modeled, is the way I would describe it. So there's areas that have darker versions of the mix and lighter versions, and it also isn't completely mixed fully. So you can see there's areas where you can see blue peeking through, and you could see a little bit of burnt sienna. And I love that look, and I did it intentionally. And so that's how I did the background. And then once I moved to the bird, I'm intentionally leaving it very, very loose. And I've been experimenting a lot with this style recently, where basically I'm just giving you the essence of the shapes and the essence of what's there. So even with the feathers, so the feathers is a really good example of this. When I'm painting the feathers, I'm not actually painting stroke for stroke in a very realistic way. I'm just making marks very loosely that give you the hint of a feather, and our mind basically can fill in all of the details. And so I'm being very aware of leaving white areas that creates those details. Hopefully that makes sense. And so that's what I did with the bird feathers. And then also with the rest of the bird, you can see the underside of the belly. I'm just dotting in a few really light strokes to give you the hint that there are feathers under there and a little bit of coloring, but otherwise not much. And so that's basically what I did with the bird. And I'm being also really careful about how dry the paint is and where I'm touching colors with wet paint, because as you know, with watercolors, if the paint is wet, the new colors are going to go where the water is and where the wetness is. And so if you're working in a wet area, you just have to be really careful about where you're touching new colors to colors that are already down. And so I just was having fun with this bird, and I enjoyed giving him a really loose look and experimenting a lot still with just wet on wet and the timing of when I'm putting down colors and not. And also experimenting with snow, because this winter I've been playing a lot with snow on trees like you saw in the last video, and in also the Paint With Me challenge in December. And so this is one of those where I'm still experimenting with snow, and also with using white gouache to make snow. So at the end of this, when everything is done and dried, I actually took white gouache and then I added details to the snow that the bird is sitting on. I also added a little bit of detail to its feathers, and I also used it to splatter snow in the background. So I just basically used pretty concentrated color gouache with a little bit of water, so it's not very transparent, and then I just splattered the paint onto the paper when it was dry. And you can also see that at the very end, I felt like there wasn't a lot of contrast between the bottom of the bird and the background. And so I came back and added darkness around the bottom of the bird, because the bird's belly is white, and then I didn't put enough of a dark background to contrast with the whiteness. So I had to compensate by coming back and doing it at the end. And if I were to do this again, I would definitely have made the background around the belly of the bird darker to begin with, and not have gone back and done it at the very end. So that's sort of, you could look at it kind of as a mistake, but I look at it as a lesson learned. And the second lesson learned I would do is with the tail. So the tail of the bird, I feel like fades a little bit too much into the background. And so I would have intentionally left more of a highlight or a white area of the paper at the top of its tail, so that it would stand out more from the background than it does. And so those are the lessons that I learned, the kind of the mistakes that I made that I would do differently if I did it again. And so hopefully that helps you if you're going to give this a try too. All right, so now for something really fun. If you want to keep watching, I actually included the very first attempt I made at this bird that was done on handmade paper. And so I don't paint on handmade paper a lot. And so you can see in this last few minutes of this video, the disaster of my first attempt that I did on handmade paper. And I only just had this one piece of paper, and I wanted to just try it. I approached it with an attitude of, let me just give this a try. I don't know how it's going to turn out. And lesson learned, it turns out that handmade paper takes a lot longer to dry than watercolor paper. And I tried letting it dry in between when I noticed that it was taking a long time, and it still would have taken longer. I needed to wait even longer than I did for the paper to dry in order to come back with a new layer. And I just ran out of patience, and I just decided, you know what? I'm going to go and try this bird on my regular watercolor paper that I'm used to. And that just goes to show that paper makes a huge, huge difference when you're painting with watercolor. So if you're used to a certain paper, even a certain brand, you're going to find that if you switch brands and switch paper, your painting techniques have to change. And so this is just a testament to the fact that watercolor paper makes a really big difference. And painting with good watercolor paper is going to make a huge difference. That's not to say that handmade paper is bad. I actually think it has a beautiful, beautiful quality to it. I'm just not equipped with enough experience to paint well on it. And so I might try this again in the future, but I just want to show you this kind of like a little bit of a blooper reel at the end of this video, that not every attempt I make at painting something is going to turn out well. And this is an instance where it did not turn out well. I clearly am not good at painting on handmade paper, but I want to show you what that looks like, what it looks like when it's a new paper that you're not used to. It's not that you're not good at painting. And that's the thing, is a lot of people might try papers that they're not used to, or they don't know how to work with, and they might just make the decision that they're not good at watercolors when actually it's the paper. And so I know that it wasn't my fault here. Well, maybe it was my fault in the sense of I needed to spend more time with the paper and allowing it to dry in between the layers. But it doesn't mean that I'm not good at painting. It just means that I need to practice more with the supplies that I'm using. And so I hope that was fun to watch, and I hope that this little bird inspires you to give this a try. And thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a great start to 2020, and thank you so much for being here.